Hello, John from the Lib Dem Podcast here. We are delighted to say that this episode is sponsored by Prater Rains. Now more than ever, you need a professional-looking online presence and website. Prater Rains have been helping Liberal Democrat campaigns succeed for 18 years. Their LibDem Foci package combines a website, social media and email system to help LibDems win. You'll receive great support from real people, fair pricing and a huge range of features to choose from. Prater Rains are already the bespoke developers for Lighthouse, LibDem Draw Online and the LD Directory. They combine a talented system design with an unrivaled understanding of our party, our data and our systems. To find out more, check out the Prater Rains website at praterrains.co.uk/liberal-democrats. Now, on with the podcast. Hello and welcome to the Lib Dem Podcast. My name is John Potter and we are delighted to have the new chair of the LGBT Liberal Democrats, Gareth Lewis Shelton. Welcome to the podcast, Gareth.
Thanks, John. I'm really pleased to be here. Thanks so much for the invitation.
And I suppose I've got to say congratulations first on becoming chair.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm pleased and I'm looking forward to seeing what we're able to do with our term.
Like all the other organisations we've had on the podcast, obviously, first and foremost, we should never just assume everyone knows what the organisation is for. So give us your 2-minute pitch on what the LGBT LibDems do.
Okay, so the LGBT plus LibDems were founded in 1988 and it changed its name in 2011 to its current name. And the whole point is to fight for LGBT rights and representation, both within the party and also more externally as well. So I think the way that a lot of people in the group think of ourselves is that we are a critical friend to the party, and we're also helping develop policy and campaigning for the moving forward. So we've sort of got that double prong to what we do.
And if you want to find information about the organisation, you've got a Facebook page, you're on Twitter, Instagram, website. Anything else I've missed there?
No, that's everything. And so, lgbt.libdems.org.uk. And one of the things that our new exec really wants to focus on is reaching out and getting lots of new members and lots of new people involved. So if you haven't joined yet, you can join for as little as £5. So I would really encourage you, get involved. We hope to have lots of things coming up that will be very useful to you. Definitely join or get involved if you haven't done so already.
And we're going to talk about some of the things, some of your plans, some of your but let's talk about the current state of play at the moment. So what are the current issues, campaigns that your group is kind of pushing within the Lib Dems?
So, it's been a tricky time for the group, and people may have noticed that for the last, few months, we've been a bit dormant. There's been issues of, can't even summarise it in a really concise way. But
internal discussions.
We've had some difficulties, and there's only our election for our 2020 exec only took place a couple of months ago. So we're all brand new here, or a lot of us are brand new here. But I think the things that, that we want to focus on going forward, there are so many things going on in the world at the moment that affect LGBT people, just as there always have been. But I don't know if people would have seen recently, there's a story in Pink News this morning about with Public Health England's restructuring, what happens to PrEP and what happens to how our public health systems handle HIV. Like, that's a new problem. And there's also, the chronic problem of stigma and discrimination against trans people, which I think, a lot of people will have noticed over the last few months or years. Actually, that's becoming really nasty, and we're at risk of stepping backwards in terms of equality rather than moving forwards. And so, those are just two areas which are huge issues, just in the UK.
And do you think, is LibDem policy where it needs to be in terms of LGBT plus rights? Do we have the right policies but need to shout about them more? Where are the LibDems? How do you view the LibDems at the moment?
So I think that the Lib Dems as a party are probably the best party for LGBT rights. But I think one of the things that we always need to be conscious of, and I suppose this applies to all sorts of different policy areas, is that you can't be complacent. Policy challenges change all the time. And, what was really good in 2017 or 2019 won't be good in 2024. And we need to be thinking 5 years ahead. So, I don't think I look at, the Lib Dem manifesto and think, good God, we're dreadful on this. But I wouldn't feel confident in saying that, we're not automatically ahead of the game. And, that's the job of our group to keep pushing and pushing and pushing.
Yeah, and I suppose you're right. Like any issue, you can't be complacent to it. You can't be. I mean, how many people have assumed that on race issues, and things like that, and you see that when things like the Black Lives Matter comes up, that a lot of people can drift and take something for granted. And I suppose the LGBT plus LibDems don't want to take anything for granted because it's like I say, it's very easy for things to slip. And I suppose that's what you're saying there.
Absolutely. And I think, one of the things, over the last couple of elections, the party generally has lost some trust, hasn't it? And, I'm not going to go into details, but there have certainly been moments in our recent general elections where our reputation as the unquestionable, 100% steadfast ally of LGBT people has been called into question. And I don't think we've recovered from that. So we need to do a lot of work still there.
Do you think then Lib Dem HQ has taken it a little bit for granted, the LGBTQ vote, and just assume, because there are lots of gay Lib Dems that I know I'm friends with, and like I said, we have two people from the group who are councillors in Preston, and out of our 9. So, but do you think we take it a little bit for granted that this support is naturally going to come our way?
I don't think so, actually, to be fair. And, I know lots of people who work in HQ and have been involved with leadership campaigns and all sorts of, lots of people who I think we can count on do not take it for granted. But I think it's the case with so many things facing a small party, and even big ones as well. The party is split in so many directions that actually, unless you've got, people whose job it is just to focus on this, it's hard to keep moving forward. And I think, especially this year when, the group has been in limbo, we've not been able to help fulfill that function. But I've been really encouraged and pleased. Lots of people have reached out to me since my election saying, I know that maybe we haven't been as good on this as we should be, and I really want to work with you on that. So I don't think it's a matter of taking it for granted. I think it's a capacity problem.
Okay, and I'm going to kind of flip the question a little bit. Okay. Do you think the public take it for granted that issues that might seem of great importance to the LGBT plus community and Lib Dems have championed, yet haven't got traction in like say a general election, because people are now used to LGBT communities. They're now used to a rainbow flags flying outside on Pride Month, etc. Do you think that's a problem?
What do you mean? So do I think it's a problem that the public sort of are bored of these issues, do you mean? Well,
not bored. It's probably a bit. I was thinking it's just not high on the agenda anymore. It's never going to be up there probably with the NHS or something like that. But do you think there's a general acceptance now? Well, the LGBT community, what more do they want from a general public point of view?
Yeah, I get what you mean. I think, with the passing of same-sex marriage, I think, there are some people who think, well, they got same-sex marriage. What more could they possibly want? And I think you're right. There probably is a small current of that. I think, one of the cases that we still have to keep making is, there is still unfinished business. So, even since the passing of same-sex marriage, there has still been all sorts of problems. So Stonewall did a really big review in 2016. And lots of other organisations have done big reviews since. There are disparities in mental health, there are disparities in access to social care, there are disparities, in all sorts of different areas, which having same-sex marriage doesn't solve. And so we've still got unfinished business, I think, is a case that may need to be made to the general public. And also to the party, actually. Yeah. I think, one of the things, and I think the Labour Party is going through a similar thing as well, where, there's a lot of, we're not winning because we're not talking about bread and butter issues, which sometimes is dog whistle for, well, just don't mention LGBT people or black people or women, just forget about them. which I don't think is always how people mean it, but I think it's often the accidental implication, if nothing else. And I think, we need to keep making the case that, equalities issues are bread and butter issues. They're not nice frivolities. They are really serious and material to lots and lots of people.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get right back to the group now. Now, you said the group had been dormant for a bit of time, and so a councillor in our group joined and then left because he didn't see there wasn't much happening. He didn't see what he was getting for his money, etc. So what's your plan to kind of change that?
Yeah, I mean, I completely empathise with that. So I've been a party member since, I think, 2011 or maybe 2000. I think I let my membership lapse for 1 year and then joined. So I've got 2 start dates. I'm not sure which one's the best one to use. And I never really got involved with the group either. And I've always thought that, a lot of the people in the group, historically and presently, I think it's a group with a lot of integrity. I think it's a group that has always been run by people with principle who, are very serious about the causes that really, really need advocating. I only joined the group last year with the view to joining and doing more reaching out. Because I think that, that's true to my experience in the party generally and generally what I do in life. I'm all about reaching out as a person and listening and building those relationships. So I fully empathise with your colleagues who have felt that there hasn't been a reason to join. And so we have got some things in the pipeline to hopefully change people's minds. So you may be aware that Manchester Pride is coming up soon and Pride Cymru as well. And so we want to be putting on some events in the next couple of weeks to coincide with those. I ran similar for London LibDems in, was it late June or early July? Late June, I think. For when London Pride would have been, we had a panel discussion and we had a quiz in the evening, which, they're just little things, but events are a really good way to get people together and to raise those issues and build those relationships. So that's what I've done in London. It's what I plan to do in Manchester and Wales and everywhere else across the country when we get round to it. So that's just a starting point. But in addition to that, when I was campaigning for chair, I spoke to almost 100 people, I think, about, what they would want to see out of Plus. And some of them were former members, some of them were current members, all sorts of different relationships to the group. And there were some things that really stuck out, which I think we're all quite determined to deliver. I think, the new exec, whether they're returning members or new members, I think there's a consensus that we want to be reaching out much more. And, that's helping people plan their Pride events or their LGBT History Month events or, an LGBT spin on Black History Month. There's that really basic stuff. But also there's support that people want for candidates and would-be candidates in elections and selections. Those are big areas that we want to focus on. And there's lots of stuff like that we want to be doing, whether it's in training, events, packs, the sort of stuff that, organisations like the Young Liberals manage to do, as a matter of routine. We want to be building that system as well. And one of the other things, which may be particularly relevant to your colleagues, is I've spoken to a couple of councillors who have asked, well, what are we meant to do at a local government level? Like, I get what we're meant to do. If we win a majority in Parliament, we can legislate for this and we can spend this. But what actually does practical campaigning for LGBT rights look like on the ground? So one of the things I'm hoping to convene at the end of August, early September, and it will likely be a series of events, is sort of a forum for LGBT councillors, just where we can share best practice and share ideas. Because I think, the way that it is, for Lib Dem activists and councillors is there are lots of people always having lots of really good ideas, but our challenge sometimes is in those ideas spreading across the rest of the country. So that, I think, we've got a facilitation role, because I'm confident that actually a lot of people do have some really good ideas.
And do you see also as a role going forward as a kind of a support network as well? So again, I can talk about my group. Daniel came out as a trans person. So he's came out twice. He came out first as a gay person, and then now as a trans person. And, luckily he got nothing but support from council officers, from opposition parties, got on the local news and radio and stuff like that. But I can imagine that was extraordinarily kind of brave for Daniel to make that. And actually having a support network around that he knows he could go to would probably be really important.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something we would love to do. And I think, this is one of the things that we hope to get out of these forums in particular, finding out what support people want. Because, so often it's easy to say, well, I would personally want this, so here you are, you can have this, which actually, okay, you're never going to use it. So actually having those conversations and just connecting people is a really important place to start. I'd love us to be in a position where we could offer, structured mentoring, but I'm conscious that, our term is only till the end of this year, so that may end up as a next year project. But I would really, really like to build an ecosystem, as it were, of LGBT counsellors and activists and groups and MPs when we get them, where everyone feels supported and that we're facilitators, either providing stuff or connecting people to other people. I think that's definitely the direction that we want to and we should be moving in.
Because the National Party does have, obviously, programmes to help people from diverse backgrounds, future women's kind of groups and, future potential leaders and stuff like that. Do you think more has to be done in terms of helping people from the LGBT plus communities to help them stand as a candidate?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it isn't just standing as a candidate itself, but it's also going for selection. So I'll be honest and I say I don't have an accurate data set with me of how many people stood to be selected or stood as candidates recently. But I think, anecdotally, the number probably isn't very high. Whilst we've, got some stars who we can, name and notice, I wouldn't be confident that actually I wouldn't be confident that our selection and election process is as diverse as we might want when it comes to LGBT people. So, I think that's definitely something we want to improve.
Do you think that's an age thing? I mean, not to be blunt, that all political parties generally are quite old and quite white and quite straight. If we're being blunt, I was first elected when I was 27. So that's 10 years now. But even just being my age at the time was seen as absolutely, as a rarity in local government. Do you find that that's the part of the problem? Is the age demographic still of a Liberal Democrat is old, white, and straight? Yeah,
I mean, I think that will be part of it, but I think it's also important to remember that people can come out at any age, and actually, just because we've always thought they were straight doesn't mean that they are, or they were cis, So I wouldn't be comfortable making such a blanket statement, but it's likely a contributory factor.
Yeah. So we've talked about kind of some of the issues you want to bring forward within the group, some of the challenges you want. Is there also a kind of should we be doing more about campaigning about a kind of a global issue of some of the problems faced by the LGBT plus community? For example, we've seen particularly authoritarian regimes pop up around the world, and what should be our response locally? So I'm just going to give an example. So you've got these kind of gay-free zones in places like Poland, where now should Preston City Council end their twinning association because with an area because of it? I mean, is that something we should be doing on a local level? Think, okay, what can we do here to help the LGBTQ communities around the world?
That's a really good question. So I definitely think that all politics ultimately takes place. We're in a very connected world. I don't think we can turn our eyes to away from problems just because they're happening in a different country. And I think as liberals, a lot of us have that view that justice is a global and universal thing. I don't know if I would necessarily recommend any specific courses of action. I think obviously I'm not an international relations expert. I don't know if cutting off your ties to a town would be effective or necessarily send the right message. And I think that's a really difficult issue when it comes to, international relations like that, isn't it? Where, it's that, the two prongs, aren't there? Of do you sanction, or do you try to keep building relationships and be that friend? And I suppose it wouldn't be for me to say what to do, but I definitely would say we should be turning our focus on injustice wherever it is, at all levels. I would very much encourage that. And I think even if it makes no difference in Poland, I think it sends a message to the LGBT people in your community that you're on their side. And I think that's a message, especially with, for trans people at the moment, this horrible media and online environment often, sending a message that you're on trans people's side, I think is just an imperative for all of us.
No, and I'm glad you've raised that, because that's where I was going next. I mean, the trans issue seems to be the one that's getting the most attention. Obviously, Labour decided to stay silent on whether we should reform the Gender Recognition Act, because they just don't want to get into that argument. That, for me, they're showing a little bit of cowardice by just not grasping that issue, while the Lib Dems have come out very strongly in saying, trans rights are human rights and whatnot. So where is that a battle that we're losing the public on, or are we as Lib Dems an outlier? How do you feel about that at the moment?
I think it's one of those things, isn't it, where how things feel and look right now might not actually be indicative of where things really are or where they're going. So I'm an optimist inherently. I will always say, well, we're definitely winning. It's definitely going to happen eventually. And I think, whilst I've previously said that, same-sex marriage isn't the be-all and end-all, there was a time not too long ago where it looked like an utterly impossible thing. And attitudes towards gay people, which, just completely different to what they are now. And there are those moments in history where things just suddenly change, and there are all sorts of different reasons for that. And so, I wouldn't say that we're definitely winning the argument for trans rights as human rights right now. But I wouldn't be pessimistic or cynical, because I don't think that helps us. But I think there are definitely people in politics, in the media, online, who are just hostile, and actually they're almost not worth engaging with. But I think that most people in the country, actually, if you talk to them and you talk to them about the people's need and right to live in dignity, I think that's a really powerful argument for a lot of people. And actually, gradually will change their minds and build not just tolerance but genuine acceptance.
And do you think, this is not meant to be a kind of a snotty phrase, but I say people just need a bit of education on the issue. And I said I don't mean that as a condescending, because we had, when Daniel came out as trans in our group, we had a general discussion about what does that mean for kind of feminist rights versus trans rights and all the rest of it. And not out of no kind of, there was no aggro or anything like that. It was generally people wanting to know where they sit on it. A classic example for me, I'm very into my rugby. And so there's a lot of discussion going on in rugby now about whether a trans player, should they be allowed to play? So a trans man playing in a female team, a trans woman playing in a female team, and how that should work, and whether it should be yes, absolutely, or the caveats. You can understand that a lot of these things bring up complications, that it's not automatically straightforward what the answer is, or is it?
I think one of the parallels, and obviously it's different, but I still think it's a really relevant parallel. There have been so many studies which show that telling people about gay people doesn't change their mind about them. But once someone says, oh, well, I've got a gay uncle, actually the perspective just changes massively. And I think, that would be, so I suppose I wouldn't rely on education, but I think actually the more visible we all are, whether it's in standing up for people or being out, and obviously that's a personal decision for everyone, I think gradually as people say, oh, actually, I know a trans person, I know a bi person, actually, it completely changes their perspective. So I think there's going to be a gradual change in this front. And I think that those personal relationships are more powerful than education itself. But I think one of the things, at the same time that I think is absolutely, rancid is, the thing that happens in the media often. And, I think the media is a great tool for good as well. But this is one particular thing that I find really obnoxious and horrible. And you find it also, with black people around Black Lives Matter, people having, coming on air to justify their own existence to a hostile panel. That's something that's really odious. And I think that's something we should be calling out as well, that, it's just dehumanizing to do that to people. But yeah, those personal relationships, I think, are really powerful agents for change.
So I suppose now, as we start to come near the end of our discussion, is kind of, so what's next for you? What's in your immediate to-do list?
Okay, so my immediate to-do list is to sort out Manchester Pride and Pride Cymru. They're only a week and a half away, so we definitely want to have those events up online, start telling everyone about them. And in addition to that, we want to be reaching out, I want to be reaching out particularly over the next week or so to all of the different AOs and SAOs, introducing us, building those relationships, because I think, there is a real consensus in the party now, I think, that the fight for justice has to be intersectional. So, I want to be reaching out to LDCRE, LDRDC, Lib Dem Women, Campaign for Gender Balance, the Disability Association, everyone, and obviously Young Liberals, of course, reaching out to them and seeing what we can do jointly together. And I think especially with, the huge local elections coming up next year, the more money that we can collectively raise to support candidates from different backgrounds, I think that's a really pressing issue. And I think, we'll have to work together, all of us with various groups, to really make a difference. So those are my top two things, as well as putting on some other events as well, just to get to know our members, because we've got 300, but there was a diversity study of the party last year, I think, which had 18% of members identified as LGBT, which with 120,000 members, that means that, there's potentially like 2,500. My maths is terrible. That may be off by several hundred. We could be 10 times bigger potentially. So, and that's
what we found with other AOs as well, is the fact that, whether that's the Association of Engineers, etc., where we know there are far more members who have a passion for engineering and science, etc., than are actually a member of these AOs, where you will be the people to drive policy, to drive campaigns into the party. So I suppose a final message from us is, if you're interested, go check out the Facebook page, go check out the website. Do join if you can. Like I say, there are discretionary rates for people who are struggling on things like that. And I just want to say thank you very much for your time today. It's been a fantastic discussion, and congratulations again on your new role.
Thank you so much, and thanks so much for having me. I've really enjoyed this. Thank you.
So that's the Lib Dem podcast for this episode. If you want to catch any previous episodes, you can do. They're all available to download at your normal podcast providers. We're also on YouTube and Facebook, so you can watch this if the audio experience isn't enough for you. And you can follow with all the latest news and ongoings with the podcast at LibDem Pod. Like I say, my name is John Potter. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll be back with another episode very soon.